listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today. We have another show lined up for you all today. Today, we're talking to Nell 3D. She is a Harvard-trained subtraction activist. Say that 3 times as fast as you can. Forbes Leadership Senior Contributor and founder of the Systematic Subtraction Framework. Nell partners with high-achieving women who influence capital and culture to stop the endless add more cycle. And instead of just going through her whole resume, that'll probably take me 25 minutes of the whole show. Let me just cut to the chase and say to you, Nell 3D, thank you for being on today, this morning. How you doing?
I'm great, Shamaya. So glad to be here.
I had to stop because it's like you have so much going on in your resume. I mean, you have amazing things you're doing with your stack that we're going to get on into later in the show. But I just want to first and foremost say thank you for being on today, this morning, our audience, our viewers. If you can, kind of shed light into your professional background and what got you started to what you're doing.
Yeah. So, it goes back to when I was 12 years old and I had this really powerful kind of purpose moment. I moved between 2 towns here in Connecticut. And the first town was the capital and kind of this city that's a bit down on its luck, frankly, as a lot of American cities, right? Industry has collapsed and fallen out. And so now the elementary school I went to was lovely and very community supported and enriched with all these fabulously involved parents and teachers. The middle school I would have gone to at 13 was not. I'm sure in your area too, you have an image of what some of these under-resourced inner city schools can look like. And it's not even physically safe, much less academically or personally enriching. And so my mom was a self-employed massage therapist, but she had the wherewithal to move us across this arbitrary town line in giving me access to public schools that were, nationally recognized. And so just at 12 years old, I really saw that like the kids over there and the kids over here are the same mix of super smart or mischievous or athletic, but they were getting such different opportunities. And that just didn't sit right with me. So when I graduated college, I went into the nonprofit sector because I thought that's what one did to make a difference, and had an amazing decade of community work in the front lines, in Rome, managing a global program, in the West Bank of Palestine, dealing with refugee communities, just really interesting work, and realized that wasn't my highest and best use. I'm not a social worker. I didn't speak Arabic fluently enough to really help the kids on the ground. So I was able to bring some resource and get them started, but then my utility kind of ran out. And so I went to business school, and that is what has led me to this work now. Most importantly, and where I'll leave us, is this most recent work around subtraction. Because I, like maybe many of your listeners, kind of in whatever sector, whether it's nonprofit or domestic or private sector, chased the gold stars. I was doing all the right things, working harder and harder and harder and harder. And it started to kind of flatten out. And so that's where I had this insight that actually maybe the magic and the next level of growth is actually in doing less.
You also call yourselves the subtraction activist after a personal, actual situation story. So kind of explore that a little bit with our audience. And what was the moment that made you realize more wasn't no longer the answer?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah, there was a moment. So, it was a summer day a few years ago, and I really was on top of the world. I had this realization about one-dimensional work not working. Seeking impact only left out me, my own well-being, and kind of my family situation and my career growth. And so I had gotten really integrated. I was pursuing this 3-dimensional, Nell 3D leadership of me and we and world. And I felt aligned. I felt inspired. I was following this 12-year-old self's purpose, right? Life was good. So it's a sunny summer Friday, and I'm driving to my trainer because we all have to build our muscle and get strong to have dense bones and survive perimenopause. And it was busy. It was a busy time with all this good stuff. So I was distracted. I was in my head and running through my list of to-dos after the workout. And I glanced down at my phone in the cup holder. Maybe people can relate. And I missed a turn that I take 3 or 4 times a day. We're a mile from my house. And I went head on into a 20-ton landscaping truck. I was okay. They were okay. So I, dodged a bullet, as we say, which really could have been a bad one. And that moment really showed me that no matter the alignment, the purpose, the intentionality, the inspiration, if we are doing too much, it is physically dangerous to us, but also to people around us. And that was more than enough for me to say, okay, we've got to let some things drop because the distraction is not sustainable, not safe.
Life does find a way to slow us down, whether we're ready or not ready, or if we want to or don't want to. Life has a funny way to say, you know what, time out, whether you want to take it or not. What was it like for you to put the pieces back together after that situation? Because that can rattle people a lot, but for you to not let it to completely destroy you, you allow it to reposition you. Kind of tell us what was the recovery process with that?
So I pride myself on throughout my life, and I don't really know if this is genetic or learned or lucky or a blend. I really lean into this idea of pro-resilience. So not resilience after a divorce or burnout or a head-on car crash that you caused, but actually pro-resilience. And this kind of idea of not just, white knuckling it and getting back in the car and driving and feeling safe and getting back on the road, but how can I move forward here, right? How can I actually let this crash, literal crash, make me a better person, and then share that with the world, whoever might want or need to hear that message, so that they don't have to have an externally imposed unwanted crash to have that realization. And so, I've always been a teacher in one way or another since before college, even in high school. Those were my earliest jobs, was always kind of some teaching or coaching. And so that process of kind of having experience, metabolizing the insight, and then serving it up to whomever needs it is something that's really familiar to me in life. And so truly, I was already really working on this lead in 3D and that alignment piece. The subtraction dropped in pretty quickly after this accident, right? It wasn't a super complicated journey of like, you're doing too much, do less. I think what evolved over those next few months as I was speaking to audiences and podcasts and corporate groups, as I do, was this stop, drop, and roll methodology of how you can actually do it. And so happy to share if that's useful. But having that teacher mode, I think, pulled it together pretty quickly for me after the accident.
Once again, let's refocus ready and watching this online, talking to our guest today, Nell 3D, and she kind of gave a nice segue to her method that she has, stop and roll method. Yeah, if you don't mind, share with us, what is that all about?
Yeah. So I remember it, and some of your listeners, 80s babies, might remember the firemen coming into elementary school, right, with their big cool hats and their axes and uniforms, and telling us, if something on your body catches on fire, don't run around the room looking for a fire extinguisher even. Just stop, drop to the floor, and roll around to extinguish those flames, right? We have all that we need right here. It's not about panic. And I started realizing as I was sharing this experience and this realization that too much is dangerous, like something on your body being on fire, it kind of clicked for me. And so the method here briefly is stop. And this isn't like take a sabbatical or find a monk on the mountainside and go meditate for a month. this is in your seat, right? At your computer or around the kitchen table. Stop, eyes wide open, and gather some data. How's it actually going? And that might be in your relationship with your spouse or your kid. That might be in your work or with a client. It might be your own physical well-being. It might be your whole life and your legacy, right? So it can happen at any scale, but gather some data. Maybe my husband and I just haven't had a deep conversation in a few weeks and it doesn't feel normal. I feel disconnected. Maybe 2 clients have fired me this week. What's going on? Maybe 3 new clients have poured in. What am I doing right? How can I replicate that, right? So whatever the data might be, sit down with that and really look at it to get present. Then, and only then, does the subtraction come. So this is the drop, which, really importantly, we do as an experiment. And so my version of subtraction, systematic subtraction, is not about like ruthlessly redlining things and declining calendar invites and just like blowing up your life. It's much more subtle. And so we experiment. We think, gosh, what if I made a point to call each client on Mondays to check in so that they don't drop? Or what if I let go of the unhelpful thinking that I'm not doing enough and just kept doing what I know to work and let the clients pour in? Or, whatever the thing is, just experiment with letting go of a meeting, letting go of unhelpful thinking, letting go of, an extra step you're taking to design the client proposal on Canva in a way that maybe is unnecessary. Let go of something as an experiment. Finally, the roll is where really the magic happens, because here is where we get to unlock more impact even without doing more, because we start connecting the dots of the things we're doing. Right? This is, if people really want to nerd out, this is about systems thinking, which is a beautiful, deep area of scholarship and theory, really. But the point is that we are a system. We live in a system. Our family's a system. Our company's a system. Our whole supply chain and industry are systems. And so when we just try to act linearly, I'll do this, and then this, and then this, we end up with a to-do list that is unsustainably long, and we're missing opportunity. Because when we come back and roll and connect the dots, we create ripples from a single action that really amplify our impact. So that's the stop, drop, and roll relatively in brief. And that's what we practice, in the Substack and in my work.
It's funny. It's like you've been listening to the show because we've been recently talking about systems, and you spoke about connecting the dots. That ties into what I want to talk to you more about, and that is the work you do with women who influence capital and culture. What was, speaking of connecting dots, what's some of the unique pressures that they face, and how are they using subtraction, not just to have a nice to have game plan, but something that's more essential to sustaining success?
Yeah, so well framed. And I do love the systems thinking. I may or may not have heard a few shows, so I love that you're there too. I think the refocusing that we collectively need right now, because of how the world is largely, if not solely, in my view, linked to this paradigm shift from the industrial era, kind of production line version, the career ladder, right? This linear, this, then that, which we all know is not real in this world. And yet it's what we've been taught. It's what we're rewarded to do. It's kind of how our, structures are set up. Women particularly, and not only, but there is a feminine element that women tend more to have that many men also have access to, which is recognizing the interconnectedness, right? Our bodies are systems. We've got blood, we've got neurology, we've got skin and organs and moods, and all of these things interact as systems. And so in the face of children to raise, elders to care for, physical health to manage, work to deal with, supply chains that are ever more complex because of tariffs and geopolitical challenges, employees who are struggling and flailing. Like, you know, the crises are many, but they're all interwoven. And so, number one, if we try to just deal with one of them, I'm just going to deal with childcare today. I'm just going to deal with my employees. Everything else falls apart. And it's not that we should or can be perfect in every area all the time, but we're juggling a bunch of balls, and some of them are glass. Right? Some of them are rubber. And so if we let them fall for a day or a month, they'll bounce and we can catch them next month. But some of them are glass. And so if we let them fall, they shatter. So the challenge is keeping all the balls in the air. The opportunity of recognizing systems thinking, the reality that we live in systems, is that we can find opportunities where two different things we're doing connect and serve each other. And so by, you know, setting email to be off from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m., and if you need to get something out because you've got a minute in the school pickup line and you want to take advantage and send it, you schedule it for 9 a.m., right? Because now you have a clearer mind to get some good sleep so that your brain is intact the next day. But you also are a better manager, setting that example for other people also to get their sleep and do what they need to do between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. And you're a bit more present for whomever you're with that evening, whether it's yourself getting a minute to read or walk or be outside, whether it's your kids and supporting them with homework or an emotional challenge at school, right? And so it's not that we're doing more, and it's not that we're doing necessarily even anything differently, but we're just thinking through those connections and those opportunities to be the systems person, to be the person we want to be in all of our systems.
And people who are doing well, and what I mean by that in air quotes, doing well, they work in a system that works for them. And to your point, when you say understanding the meaning behind those points, behind those, if you will, checkpoints, mile markers, it kind of not only shows you where you are in the map, but it kind of gives you a reality check. Okay, this is where I really am versus this is the fairy tale I want to believe.
Correct. And, 1,000% agree. The element I would add is that because things are changing so quickly right now, a lot of those historical, well-established checkpoints actually are not valid anymore. They actually do not matter, right? Because we have all these new technologies and new opportunities, which can be scary and difficult, but also offer massive opportunity, right? So, for example, the fact that your direct report sits and takes manual notes in every meeting, and so she's not totally present, and so she then has extra work after the meeting to organize and fact check and, control for typos and then distribute. We all know the AI note takers are pretty darn good, right? So maybe it's worth that direct report spending 3 to 5 minutes to just, make sure this is correct. Any typos, did names get recorded correctly, whatever it is. Voila, that's done. Right. And so that's just a very simple, trivial, kind of universal example. I am certain that there are many more in listeners', worlds, whether it's your personal life or professional. But we've got to, that's why the subtraction process is so important, because we have to audit and make sure that we're culling those leftover habits that are totally useless now, maybe even counterproductive.
Reminds me of the interview I had probably a couple of years ago. A guy was talking about operating systems, how important it is for us to update our Windows or whatever, Mac, whatever you operate on. He said, well, it's the same thing with our lives. We have to update anything that's an outdated process that no longer serves the situation of where we're trying to go. Whatever our focus is, because it's almost like if you try to drive a car from 1950 versus we have cars that are being sold in 2026. I mean, unless it's a amazing classic stable car that is built to last, most likely is not. And at some point, we have to actually go with the times. I like when you talk about with AI, because AI it's came a long way. I mean, from everyone going crazy over ChatGPT to now everyone's talking about Grok. And I'm going to just say this, personal side note, I kind of like Grok. Disclaimer, I'm not telling anybody pick anything, but I will say I lately have seen a lot of benefits with Grok, because what Grok does, I mean, everyone does it, but I'm just saying what I personal experience with Grok, it does real time with agents. I got 4 agents, and I know ChatGPT can do it, but I'm just my experience. It's so amazing how it does things in real time, and I can give it specific instructions, because that's the thing. To your point, you got to have a plan with these systems. You can't just have 4 systems, air quotes, agents, and you're not having clear, concise instructions for them to follow to execute the plan to get the results you're looking for. Because it's not a genie in a bottle where you just rub it and just makes you some magical report. It takes a little bit of legwork to actually plan out what are you envisioning for these tasks to accomplish. Because without that, in between point A to point B, you're still just putting points on the map without any real connection.
Yes. And it's exactly right. That's exactly what I see with so many leaders right now who are being so smart and brave and proactive to use these new technologies. And because of the productivity that they unleash, people just get on, even faster on this treadmill toward wherever, either an unselected destination or an old, outdated destination. Oh, and so then when they add this element of subtraction so that they can get their human brain clear and functioning optimally, that's the superpower unlock, right? Because I've got my human brain working in my system, seeing all the overlaps that AI just doesn't see. They don't have that human 3D experience that we do. And so when I'm clear and I know where I need to go now, not where I needed to go last quarter or 5 years ago in that 1950s car, I then harness these technologies and boom, 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 can get them moving really quickly to do some of that more mundane stuff that is no longer my responsibility. So it's exactly right. It's a threat paired with a monstrous opportunity. And when people add that subtraction in and I see that, then, they're off to the races and really pulling ahead of the pack.
And one last note I want to say on AI is that if you take the time to understand that, like you said, you got to keep the humanness involved. AI cannot read for you. That is a muscle we have to do ourselves. We have to keep doing some of these natural things that makes us human, that makes us more powerful than AI. So AI, yes, it could be your 1,000-army dream machine, but machines break. Machines can have intuition. It cannot just see the humanness to a situation. It can only read what's in the data that is being fed to it. So I'm saying all that to go back to what you do with your lead in 3D framework. You have these 3 things: me, we, the world. Kind of touch on that with the audience, how important it is to have those 3 in alignment, and what is your approach to that?
Yeah. So again, I'll bring it back to my story, right? I had this kind of 12-year-old sense of purpose that drove me to Harvard, to Tokyo, to 3 more master's degrees. I was driving and indeed changing lives in a really satisfying way. Finally in the West Bank, in a refugee community. So like right on the front lines where it really mattered. And, I was starting to see colleagues and classmates. I was nearing 30, and I was starting to see people really pull ahead professionally, right? To have these relationships and opportunities in professional communities that in the West Bank, in a militarily surrounded, shut down city, I was not having. So there was a little glimmer of concern about my career progress. And then my father died of brain cancer at 53 years old, horrifically young. And I didn't go to his funeral because I was too busy and the kids needed me and I didn't have the money to fly halfway around the world because I was working for a nonprofit and the mission was more important than the margins. And in those days that followed after the funeral, as I was still just sitting at my desk doing what I do that I had been doing the day of the funeral, the day before, the day after, this really started to not feel good to me and how I was choosing to live. But I persisted, right? The work was important and urgent. I didn't have a lot of time. I wasn't stopping to ask how it's really going. So it was just kind of a quiet voice that I could put to bed pretty easily with more work, usually. And then later that year, my marriage fell apart. And we began divorce. And those three things, the career quake, and then the dad's funeral, and then the divorce, were finally enough of that stop you don't want to realize that this single-minded pursuit of impact, again, aligned with that 12-year-old self's purpose, beautiful, working, but leaving out me and my health and my mental health and the kind of daughter I wanted to be and the kind of spouse and partner I wanted to be. And then my both my family, my marriage and my dad and my half sister who I missed showing up for, but also my career, that I was kind of serving this individual human, not as well as the social worker could and not as well as I could do somewhere else. And so that was, the realization that all three dimensions matter. No matter how well we do one dimension, it's a very shaky leg to build a life on. It's got to be three-dimensional, right? The three legs of the stool that keep it from tipping are me, my holistic well-being, physically, mentally, spiritually, intellectually, right? All of the things that make me well. My family that I care about investing in and growing, and my work life, my team, my career, my reputation there. And finally, the world, some larger community, but in a very specific way, not in a shame-driven, I have to save the Amazon or cure cancer or end racism. Those things cannot be done by any one human. And so they just shut us down because they're overwhelming, right? And so we have to pick a very specific, right now it's about helping women who control capital and culture subtract so that they can contribute their highest and best use, nothing more, nothing less. For me, that's my impact. That's my world. But the 3D is figuring out that world, linking it to linking it to me, and making sure that these three things are reinforcing each other. It's not overwhelming. It's not distracting. Once you get in this habit, it's actually very systematic and aligned.
Appreciate you sharing that with us. Once again, listening to Omni Focus Radio, watching us online, talking to our special guest today, Nell 3D. One quick more thing I want to touch on is your Substack. I teased it earlier in the show, but the Substack that you have is called Subtract to Succeed. What's one simple practice or micro subtraction that our viewers and listeners can start practicing immediately today to notice a soon enough shift later on?
Yeah. Drop your unhelpful thinking. It's not written down on any to-do list. It doesn't show up on your calendar, but whatever it is for you, shoot, is this the right outfit? Ooh, did I say that clearly enough? Did I remember to invite that person? Did I pay last or did they? Whatever the spirals are, not suggesting that you not be reflective. Obviously, I'm a big fan of self-reflection and growth, but we all know when it tips from helpful self-reflection and debrief of the day to unhelpful spiral. And so just a little bit sooner, a little bit earlier in the spiral, try to catch yourself and just drop it. Just let go. It is a micro thing, but it changes lives.
That's great. You also have a book that I want people to know about. Tell us the title of the book that you have, artists that can check out and where they can get it.
So it's forthcoming, TBD. You cannot find it yet, but if you're on the Substack, you will know as soon as you can. It's called Subtract to Succeed. Build success that feels as good as it looks.
Well, I appreciate that information. If you had one last statement you want to share with our audience, what would that be? How can they find you online?
So we can only improve things when we have available capacity. So look at your life and make sure you've got some capacity in your head, on your calendar, in your day, in your heart, because that's the only way to improve. Otherwise, we're just piling on and tipping over, usually. And come find me on the Substack. It's really fun. It's the Subtraction Lab, I call it. There's all kinds of great, simple, bigger tips, ideas, interviews with brilliant thinkers, and my own essays every Monday.
Like I always want to say to our guest today, Nell, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Shamaya. Let's refocus. I love your mission.